What's up? I feel like talking about what happened yesterday. So, this is the story of my second miscarriage. It's coming before my story of my first miscarriage. So, I found out I was pregnant at about 3 weeks. I actually went in on April 14th to a new OBGYN, and I went in to get some testing done. I used to have some really irregular periods, and so it was really hard to determine when I ovulated or if I ovulated at all. And so ever since I had my first miscarriage last year, I've been pretty consistent. It kind of regulated me. And I've had a good 38 to 40 day cycle. It's a much longer cycle than normal. Typically, women have about a 28 day cycle. So I'm about an extra 10 days there. But the good thing is, ever since that, I have been on a nice, consistent 38 to 40 day cycle. So Darren and I started to throw around the idea of children back in September 2015, and we talked about it, we discussed it a lot, and even though it was very early in our relationship, you know, he's 26 going on 27 and I was 24 going on 25, so it's not like we're super young, you know, we're at a good age to start thinking about having a family. So in October, we started to try and actually try to conceive. I'd say October, November, and possibly a little bit of December, we were consistently just trying. I hadn't done any ovulation strips. I hadn't seen a doctor or anything. We kind of just did what we needed to do to see if we would catch that day and hit that ovulation day. That didn't happen, and come January, we knew that we'd be moving out in a couple months. So we kind of didn't think about it. Not that we stopped trying, but we weren't keeping up with making sure we tried to calculate the dates or anything. So we kind of just let life happen. And so my last actual period was February 20th. That was the first day of like an actual 5 day long period. And then comes March and I don't get a period. However, I got some spotting on March 28th, 29th, and 30th. And I mean, TMI, it was just, you know, pink spotting. And it was weird because it's not like a spotting that I've ever had before. So I was like, what is this? And I was like, maybe we conceived a baby. Maybe this is implantation bleeding. And so I ended up going April 14th. I got an appointment with one of my doctors and my new OBGYN here in Ocala. And I set up my appointment and I kept getting negative pregnancy tests. So it's not like I wasn't trying to see if I got pregnant. Just kept getting negatives. Excuse me. And so I went in, she did the urine pregnancy test, it came back negative. And I explained, it was a nurse practitioner that I spoke with. And I explained, you know, what had gone on last year, what had gone on, you know, from the beginning when I first got my period as a teenager, and how I've always been irregular. Even when I was on the birth control pill, I still was irregular. Kept me from getting pregnant, but it's not like it regulated my period like a lot of birth controls do. So I got off of that birth control pretty early. I got off of it early in my previous relationship, probably within the first 6 months of my relationship with my last boyfriend. And so it's not like I had birth control in my system keeping me from having a baby or anything. So I told her all about that, and what we did was she sent me off to Quest to go get some blood work done. And we were going to test out my thyroid. We were going to test out my testosterone levels as well as my estrogen levels. We were testing out, I cannot for the life of me remember the name right now, but it's whatever hormone it is that triggers your period to come every month. We were testing that. So there were about 5 different things that we were testing in my blood to go over to see how come I'm not having a baby. And so she told me, okay, so what I need you to do is purchase the at-home ovulation tests. And I bought them online on Amazon. It was 50 ovulation strip tests and 20 pregnancy tests. And what I was instructed to do was you pee once a day. And just like a pregnancy test, you stick it in there, you let it do its thing. And with ovulation tests, they look like pregnancy tests, and you will get 2 dark lines. When you get your 2 dark lines, that means you either are in the process of ovulating or you're about to ovulate, whatever. So she told me, when you get a positive ovulation test, call me, and we're gonna get your blood taken 7 days after I get my blood taken, and then they register, they're able to test if I ovulated this cycle. So we're waiting for it. So it's April 14th, I got a negative pregnancy test. I got my ovulation strips 2 or 3 days later, and I started doing them. So I went ahead and did them for a couple days. I want to say I did about 5 of them, maybe 4 of them. And one day I got a big fat positive all of a sudden on this ovulation test. And I was like, yeah. So I was talking with my friend Mara, and she was like, are you sure you're not pregnant? Are you sure? And I was like, yeah, I'm not pregnant. Like, I'm not pregnant this month. I just kind of didn't have a period, or maybe that spotting was my period, or whatever it was. So I was like, look, I'll take a pregnancy test. I'll show you. And this was on Snapchat. So I took the pregnancy test that came with the ovulation strip. So it was just like a basic little strip, basic. And I Snapchatted her, and it was negative. And I took my Snapchat, and I'm like, see, I told you it's negative. I'm not pregnant. And I set my phone down. And when I set my phone down, positive started showing up. I flipped. I was like, what? No way. So that was April 21st, 1 week after my appointment with my doctor. And I'm just like freaking out. And Mara was the first person to know last time I got pregnant. She was the first person to know this time. And I'm just like, oh my God, is that a line? And I was like, it's a line. I mean, it was very faint, but it was there. And I have been testing. I mean, I had been trying to conceive for nearly 5 years, maybe a little over 5 years, between my last relationship and now. And I've never gotten a false positive, ever. And I've taken well over 100 tests in those 5 years. So I call the nurse practitioner, and she's like, Kelly, you're pregnant. She's like, if you got a positive, whether it's light or not, you just got a negative last week, you're pregnant. Congratulations. And I was like, oh my God. So I found out I was pregnant on the 21st of April, and that means that we were super early, as well as, like I said, it was very faint. So I took another test about 2 days later, and that, I mean, I got a faint positive with like midday urine. It was like, it wasn't first thing in the morning, it wasn't real concentrated, it was the middle of the day, and I got a positive, which is a fantastic sign. And so a couple days later, I took another one, and I think I took one every day for like a week, and it just kept getting darker and darker and darker, which was such a good sign, which meant my HCG levels were going up. Yes, I'm not delusional. I'm actually pregnant. Oh my gosh. So that's kind of what happened. And we went ahead and made an appointment for May 19th, which would have been expected to be about 7.5 weeks. We were going off of my last month's period from March 28th when I experienced the spotting, which should have been about a period. If you go on that 38, 40-day cycle, that should have been the time I got my period anyway. So we were basing it on that. And we were basing it on the fact that on the 14th I had a negative pregnancy test and 7 days later I had a positive. So that's kind of our calculations. So I didn't see any doctors. I didn't do anything. I had been taking prenatals for nearly a year now. On and off. Sometimes I would forget it. Sometimes I wouldn't do it for a month because I didn't buy a new bottle or anything. But I had been, prepping my body as far as just over-the-counter vitamins, which aren't, the best. Getting them prescribed from a doctor is a lot better because they include iron and they include a lot of just a lot of things that a lot of the gummies or over-the-counter chewables or whatever, they don't include. But it was a start, gave me something. I immediately, as soon as I found out I was pregnant, I immediately stopped my soda, my caffeine, my fast food, anything bad like that. I really avoided fried foods. However, I was obsessed with fried jalapenos that my boyfriend makes up at the restaurant he works at. Those are my jam. So, but for the most part, I changed my diet immediately. I found out very early. We were able to calculate the conception date actually because I use an app called Eve for tracking my period. Well, on there you can also track when you have sex, and you can track other things like symptoms you may be having, or like emotional things that you're going through that all revolve around your period and PMS and ovulation and all that stuff. So we were able to actually calculate based on March 28th from the spotting and our track record of when we were trying to conceive. We were able to find the date, and I actually conceived April 11th. So when I went in on April 14th, that's why I got a negative. It's only 3 days later. So, but 1 week later on the 21st, bam, 10 days later, I got a positive. So we didn't find anything the first miscarriage. I didn't have any testing done on the tissue or the actual fetus or anything. The hospital just didn't do it. So it's not like I had anything that specifically said, oh, well, this is what went wrong with that pregnancy. So this time around, I was real confident. I have a different partner now, and this partner, doesn't do drugs, doesn't smoke, and he's not an alcohol drinker. My previous partner started to dabble in liquor, and it was due to a lot of things that was going on in his life. But I also didn't find out till I was 7 weeks pregnant, and I had been in a very depressing time of my life. I was drinking 6 cups of coffee a day just to stay awake. And so, there's a lot of contributing factors. We didn't know we were pregnant for nearly 2 months. So there's a lot of contributing factors as to why I miscarried that first one. Statistics and doctors, everyone will tell you that if you miscarry within the first 12 weeks, it's usually chromosomal abnormalities, which is something that is no one's fault. It just means the human body is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It analyzes the baby. It says this baby didn't develop correctly or didn't form right. Get rid of it for the safety of the mother. So it's not something you can blame yourself for. It's not something you can really get upset about as far as like, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that, I could have done this. You really couldn't, and you can't stop a first trimester miscarriage. It happens, and you have to think of it positively, like it happened for the better. What if that child came out with, such horrible abnormalities from, the chromosomes not working correctly that its life was so hard. It's one of those things, it's like it's the body doing its natural process. It knows that this is not right. Let's get rid of it. So that's how I dealt with the first one, and this one as well. I lost it at about 8 weeks based on the calculations of the spotting, the conception date, and that. So I went in this past Thursday. It's 1 week ago. On May 19th, I went in for my first ultrasound, and I was 7 weeks, 3 days estimated. And the reason we were going in for the ultrasound so early, because a lot of people don't recommend it until after 10 weeks, just because babies take a while to grow, or some of them grow real fast. It's all different. So to avoid stress on the mother and the parents, people really recommend not having it. 8 weeks at the earliest. But most people say just don't get it until about 10 weeks, because then you will be seeing the growth. And you'll be able to see like good, bad. So I went in, but we went in, so we could kind of figure out the gestational age of the baby, because of the fact that I didn't really have a period and everything. We needed to figure out how far along I really was. So I went in there and I got my ultrasound right away. I will talk about the details of this office in another video, because I have left them. I am not interested in working with them at all. So regardless of that, I went in for my ultrasound. She did a transvaginal, which means not on the tummy. She had to go ahead and go inside to look better because of being kind of early in the pregnancy. And so she measured my gestational sac. She saw my ovaries, absolutely fine, no ectopic pregnancies. There's no cysts, there's no lumps, nothing's wrong with my ovaries or fallopian tubes. Fantastic news. Nothing's wrong with my uterus either, which I learned last year with the first miscarriage. I learned that at the hospital too. They told me you have an absolute healthy, female reproductive system. You should be able to hold a baby no problem. Cool, good to know. So same with this one. Everything looked fine, except the gestational sac was measuring 5 weeks. That's normal. You calculate your pregnancy off of your period, but most people don't ovulate for 2 weeks. So even though you're, 8 weeks pregnant, your baby's growth should be around 6 weeks, because it didn't actually happen until 2 weeks after that period. So she's measuring 5 weeks. Okay, that coordinates with the 7-week timeline. Okay. But the problem is there was nothing in the sac. And the ultrasound tech even said, they're really not supposed to say anything as far as like diagnosis, because they're not doctors. And I know from working with quite a few of them, they can't sit here and say, yes, you lost the baby, or no, it's in, like, they really can't. So she didn't see anything. It was empty. And at that stage of the pregnancy, you should see something, whether it be just the yolk sac or the yolk sac and a tiny little fetal pole, whatever that may be, and there was nothing in there. So I didn't get a real good look at the screen when we were doing this. I would have liked to have had her look around a little longer, but we remained hopeful. She told us, sometimes you're not going to see anything this early. Some babies are starting to develop, some you're not going to see. Let's give it some time. So she said, they'll probably have you come back in 2 weeks so we can check again and see if we can see anything in there that's started to develop more. Okay. I panicked a little, in my head I'm like, 5 weeks, that's not even possible that I'd only be 5 weeks because of the days, and I was like, but I just because I got a pregnancy test. Like, I was just, that's the best way for me to describe it. Just, what? So, we went out into the waiting room. We waited to see the nurse practitioner. We went back into the room and we waited, and she came in and she immediately basically told us I was having a chemical pregnancy and didn't even really want to entertain like hope that maybe there was some development in the next 2 weeks. That was horrible. That's not the way anyone should go about it. But that's going to be in another video. And so we were hopeful that maybe in 2 weeks something's going to show up. We're just too early. And my mom came with Darren and I, and she's like, I just don't know. I think my grandbaby's in there. So we remained hopeful. We were sad. We had some tears. But we were very hopeful that, we've read all these forms. We've read tons of real women who have had these things happen, and bam, 1 week later, 2 weeks later, there was a baby in there. So we just remained hopeful. And so that was Thursday the 19th. I'm going to put it out there. We had intercourse that afternoon, and we had intercourse Friday morning. However, we have had intercourse since we found out that we were pregnant, and I never had any bleeding or spotting. I didn't have any pain. However, sometimes I would have a little bit of uncomfortability. So sex was fine. Then Saturday around 4 p.m. I'm in the middle of work and I go to the restroom. I'm about to go to lunch and there's spotting. There's pink on my toilet paper. And I immediately called my mom in the bathroom at Walmart, like, Mom, oh no. And it wasn't like blood, but it was pink. You know, it was somewhat blood. And I got nervous. So I ended up going home early, right then and there. My manager, told me, just don't come back, go home. So I went home. It was just every now and then I would use the restroom and it'd be there, and sometimes it wouldn't, whatever. And then the next day I go to work again, and it starts up again a bit. Still pink. And so I went home again early because I could tell I was listening to the cues of my body, and it was like, you've overworked yourself. You need rest. So my manager let me go home early again, and I basically stayed either in this chair playing The Sims, or I laid down on the couch or in bed and I really just relaxed. I kept sitting. So that was all happening, and I started working with this wonderful midwife that I've met through my close friend here in Ocala, who has helped her with, she's got 3 beautiful babies, and she's been working with her through her pregnancy. So I confided in her. She knew I was pregnant back when I was like 6 weeks pregnant, and we went ahead and we decided to get some blood work done Monday, so 4 days ago. We were going to start measuring my HCG levels, make sure that they were going up properly, and she also tested my progesterone. Right now, it's Thursday. I haven't heard anything yet about my progesterone levels. I'm still waiting on the lab to get back to her so she could tell me. So I found out on Monday that my HCG levels were 20,474. That's an okay level for a 6-week pregnancy. So based on the fact that the sac was 5 weeks in measurement, having those numbers, I'm like, okay, well, that coordinates to the 6-week on the chart of HCG levels. It coordinates with 6 weeks. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm 6 weeks pregnant. So, cool. Good news. Bleeding kind of, it was spotting still. It was still pink when I used the restroom, and I wore a panty liner and I monitored, how much I was losing, and it was like, it really wasn't much. So I'm like, okay. Well, I read online that anything with your cervix when you're pregnant can stir up bleeding, whether it be intercourse, anything that you put in there. So you really need to be careful and just very gentle when it comes to anything that you have to insert into your body. And same with ultrasound. Since I had a transvaginal ultrasound, I was hoping that, the length of the probe and the fact that she had to go back and forth and look at my ovaries and then this one and check out my uterus. I was hoping that that's what it was just irritation from that transvaginal ultrasound that stirred up a little blood on my cervix. But in my heart, I knew. I didn't want to think about it. And in my heart, I knew that 2 weeks prior, I stopped feeling pregnant. And that happened with me with my last pregnancy, actually. I stopped feeling pregnant. And I didn't really talk about it because it was something that I didn't want to jinx. So even though I was still getting symptoms, but I just didn't feel it anymore inside my stomach. I was like, I lost it. It's gone. And I felt that way even before the bleeding started. So when we went to our ultrasound, I actually wasn't as excited as you'd think, because in my head I'm like, well, this might not be good. But I didn't tell, my mom that or Darren that or anybody. I didn't want to, didn't want to jinx it, didn't want to scare anybody. But it's the truth. I stopped feeling pregnant at about 6 weeks. So I went in, and so that's what happened on Monday. On Tuesday, I went in for my WIC appointment in the morning. I sat with Wick for 2 hours and 15 minutes. It was the longest appointment ever. I went through Wick last year, and it was a long it wasn't as long. Like, I was probably in and out within an hour, start to finish, from sign up till when I got, approved. And so I'm like, oh my God, surely something's going to be, there when I use the restroom after this, because I didn't go to the bathroom. So I went to the bathroom after. And TMI, I'm sorry, this is just life. I had some brown discharge, which was, in my eyes, good, because I was like, oh, it's drying up. It's old. Awesome. Maybe it's going to stop soon. Maybe it was just, irritation from the ultrasound. Yes. And I went on that day to not really have too much. And then around 8 p.m. on Tuesday is when I started to get cramping, and my lower back was really hurting. And that's the number one thing. Like, from Saturday when I was spotting, my midwife asked me every time I reported any sort of blood or spotting to her, she would always come back with, are you cramping? Nope. No pain, no cramping, no clots, nothing like that. It was just a pinky discharge, part blood, part discharge of pregnancy. So as soon as I started getting the cramps at 8 o'clock and my really bad lower back pain, I was like, shit, no. And this is completely different from last year's miscarriage. Like, this miscarriage, totally different. So I didn't have pain last year, like, at all. So that's why I was like, no. Because I know that the signs of a miscarriage, are bleeding, yes, but it's usually bright red blood, which I wasn't having. Cramping, like a period, or worse, and lower back pain. And I was like, crap, it might be happening. And Darren was at work, and he didn't get home till like 11. So that was kind of happening. So yeah, 8 o'clock is kind of when I got worried. Then around 11, like probably about 20 minutes after he got home, so like between 11 and 11:30, I went to the restroom. He was with me upstairs. He was there with me. I went to the restroom and I let him know, hey, I think he was downstairs at the time. I was like, hey, and he got, where he's like, what? And I told him, I was like, I think it's starting. And he looked, and it started to be bright red blood, and so I was like, I'm really sorry. I was like, I think this is it. So we had our moment. It was sad, but I stayed strong. I've been pretty damn strong this whole time. It's just, it's not something you can help. It's not something you can stop. It's part of life. Death is part of life. So, that kind of happened. And I think I'll talk about it in a different video, because this one's already at half an hour. So I think I'll go ahead and cut this story short, and then I'll go into kind of the actual, my day on Wednesday, what happened. That way, if there's anyone who doesn't want to know, you can skip that video or whatever. So that's basically my pregnancy story up until yesterday. And if you have any questions or anything, let me know. You can ask me anything you want. But that's my story so far. So if you're interested in hearing a little more, some more details, then just stay tuned and I'll have that video up. But thanks for spending time with me now, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye, everyone.